Hi, welcome to E-Learning Lane with Brady Licht. And today's question is all about why do some EdTech implementations and EdTech rollouts, why do they fail? And, right off the bat, this answer is going to depend on your context, of course. If there's one kind of through line through a lot of my work with e-learning is that there's no kind of easy answer. We can give answers, but there's not always going to be a perfect, easy answer, right? But why do a lot of them fail? Well, a lot of them fail for a couple reasons. But the biggest of it that I can see is that they don't take into account that their audience is actually made up of different groups. A lot of times when people have a tool that they're rolling out, they'll start by saying, well, our audience is XYZ. Our audience is generally old. Our audience has experience with Outlook already, and our audience prefers to upload and download files and save things manually, right? However, that is not the case. When we try to have an average like that, we really gloss over what's happening. Additionally, this kind of audience analysis where we're just figuring out like what is one group doing, we really end up falling into stereotyping. A lot of those, older individuals with technology are not necessarily going to be bad with technology, nor is being bad with technology always kind of the same cause or even the same thing. A great way to kind of understand this different breakdown is the classic Rogers diffusion of innovation curve, right? It's nothing new. In short, it basically breaks up an audience into saying that in any group of people, there's going to be a small group of what we call innovators. There's going to be a slightly larger group of early adopters. Then there's going to be a large group of an early majority, a large group of late majority, and then on into what are kind of unfortunately called laggards, which are just people who are kind of behind with it. But each of these segments here, again, which kind of forms a bell curve of sorts, each of these segments is going to need different supports in how a piece of educational technology is rolled out and presented to them. So let's kind of go through that one by one. Well, first, the innovators. The innovators are going to be motivated inherently, right? They're ready to learn. So with a piece of educational technology, you really don't need to do a whole lot more than just put it in front of them. And sometimes they're going to seek it out on their own. If anything, innovators sometimes can go too fast with educational technology implementations, and they can kind of create this overconfidence in the people who are rolling out the platform. It kind of becomes this, well, John over here in this classroom or this training wing or whatever, he's using the tool fine. So why can't Sally keep up with it? So again, these innovators, they're going to hop into it on their own, but they still need to be understood because, again, they can cause some misconceptions. The next group are going to be that early adopter, right? So these are people who they are not necessarily finding these tools on their own, but they are going to be bringing these tools into their work very early on, right? They're excited about innovation. If anything, the supports they need to be successful with a piece of ed tech are just some resources, right? They just need the how to do it. They're already kind of motivated to hop on board typically. They just need that extra little bit of support and extra little bit of push. Now, the early majority, on the other hand, this is this larger group. Again, we have a lot of people here. The early majority, they're a lot more motivated by once they've seen some success, right? So once they've seen the innovators and the early adopters have success with it, that is what's going to convince them to then go, okay, now I'm motivated. Now I want to learn. And on the far end, you have the late majority. The late majority is motivated not by seeing success in the overall group, but by peer pressure solely, right? So if they're seeing the majority of people have already adopted this tech, right? Whether it's something as simple as like Google Docs or whatever, or something more complex like some type of augmented reality platform or some type of generative AI tool, right? If they see that the majority of people are being successful with it, not just successful, that the majority have adopted it, they're going to pick up on it too, right? They're really following the crowd, so to speak. And at the far end are the laggards. They are people who are going to resist the adoption entirely for either a moral reason or a philosophical reason or just a matter of personality. They are not going to change. And so oftentimes when we're actually rolling out a piece of technology, we spend a lot of time on trying to pull over these people who are laggards, these people who are, they're not going to be convinced. And that right there is just wasted time because it's not going to happen. We also spend a lot of time by trying to use data to show success stories to the late majority, who again are only going to be convinced when they see that the majority of their peers are already doing it, right? And so on and so on. Each of these groups needs a specific rollout to them to understand it, right? If you're starting with a big piece of tech, the last thing you want to do is just go, our audience is like this. We'll just launch it all day one. We'll give maybe a little bit of support and they'll be successful with it. We'll just put a Promethean board in their classroom and that is it. No, what you need to do is you need to, again, cater to each of these groups and roll out slowly from one group to the next. Now, how do you actually identify these groups? There's a number of different ways you can go about it. It can be kind of your own judgment if you're an administrator, an EdTech coordinator, or if you're the head of a learning and development department, right? You really have to kind of use your own judgment on this, but you could use surveys and things like that to understand where you need to be targeting this. Now, why else do EdTech initiatives fail? Well, it goes back to that kind of other piece of the rollout. There's no longevity in support, right? You can't simply launch a piece of technology and call it good. Instead, you need ongoing support for this. So again, you think back to what we were talking about with that diffusion of innovation curve. Each of those groups, it's a slow rollout to each of them. It's not something that can be done successfully in one fell swoop. So as a part of this kind of ongoing plan, another big piece that a lot of people skip over is prototyping, right? So in the same way that you would design a product and you'd want to test it early, test often, then make revisions, you almost need to do the same thing with an implementation plan. Because even if you're the most aware administrator or aware, team captain, there are going to be things that you're going to miss out on the ground, that your team, your instructors, your teachers, again, wherever you're working, that they're going to pick up on because they're working that much closer with your audience. And so really, again, you need to test early, test often, and be able to make those revisions. Any type of kind of top-down thinking when it comes to this kind of big change here is simply not going to be successful. Beyond that, there are plenty of other reasons why EdTech initiatives, fail, why tech products fail, from culture, from resources, from, again, change in budgets, which is a part of resources, to changing personnel. Again, it's going to depend on your context at the end of the day, but the biggest thing that I see really is not understanding the different audiences, not treating them as individual groups and not reaching them at different levels, and also not having that ongoing support and not testing early often and revising how you integrate the technology. With that, again, thank you for listening. If you have any questions that you want me to answer, go ahead and send that to the email in the podcast description. And with that, if you could leave a rating and review on any platform you're on, that helps a whole bunch. And with that, thank you for listening.